All right. Hello and welcome back to Issues, a podcast in which I, A.E. Stuvie, interview folks about their favorite single issue of a comic book ever. In this series, I'm going to meet with fans and pros of all ages to discuss not only why they like a particular issue of any comic, but why comic books are important. If you would like to be a guest, you can find me all over social media at A.E. Stuvie. I love hearing about your issues. Joining me today is another fan I met on Threads when I got bored one afternoon and I posed this question about comics to the algorithm. All the comics readers out there, do you have a favorite single issue of a comic book? I'm not talking about a graphic novel, I'm talking old school floppy. I have one that pops up immediately when I think of this. It's X Factor number 87. You can read about it in a previous post on Substack. But today's guest, Jeff Stanford, who is far more interesting than me, has some amazing picks that he's going to share with you. But before he does, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your life with comics, please?
Absolutely, and again, thanks for having me. This is really awesome.
Oh, thanks.
I can't wait to nerd out with someone who actually is interested in what I'm saying. But yeah, my name's Jeff Stanford. I'm from Orlando, Florida. I do marketing and PR for a museum here in town. But my alter ego is as Nerdspresso. You can find me on Threads, Instagram, and Facebook. I did a Facebook Live show with a friend for several years, 125 episodes that you can find on Facebook, and then partnered up with my best friend from college in a new podcast, Espresso Phase 2, that you can find on Spotify. But comic books have been a huge part of my life. I was a creative writing major in college, and
Nice.
so we would sit around a round table and think deep thoughts very deeply. And our teacher was a published author, and we all bowed down to him, and and so they'd ask us what our influences were,
Mhm.
and so I was trying to impress him, and I was throwing out Hemingway and Tim O'Brien, and he saw right through that, and he's like, dude, you're like 19. I mean, it's like, what got you interested in telling stories?
Mhm.
He said, what was the first thing? And I said, well, if I got to be honest, it's comic books.
There we go.
And so then, when you own it,
Mhm.
it's just everything kind of flows from that. And
Yeah.
my first memories of loving comics is my parents would take us to Siesta Key, Florida, to stay in a little beachside motel for like a
Okay.
week. And when we'd get done with the being on the beach, we'd go to the motel pool. And to occupy me, my dad would throw spare change in the deep end of the pool, and I would dive for it.
I
So
love it.
yeah, I'm like a pearl diver for quarters,
Mhm.
and whatever change I could retrieve from the bottom of the pool, I could keep.
Mhm.
And I was probably 6, maybe 7. And so I remember at the end of the street from that motel was a 7-Eleven. And inside that 7-Eleven they had a spinning comic book rack.
Oh.
And I remember going in there with my handful of change, and it was like, do I want a candy bar or do I want a comic book? And I remember spotting like an Incredible Hulk comic was
Mhm.
in that rack, and it was the Hulk, and it was Havoc, Cyclops' brother, the
Yeah.
guy with the weird thing on his head.
Hmm.
And I grabbed that comic. I mean, I knew the Hulk because he was big and green, and you had the Ferrigno show,
Hmm.
but that's the first comic that I can remember. But then, and then as a little kid, you get comic books here and there. I
Yep.
got into middle school and I found my nerd herd. I found my tribe, and my nerd bro. He was a comic book collector, and he took me. We went to a comic book shop, and this was in the early 80s. It blew my freaking mind.
Oh,
here's a
oh, wow.
here's a place just with comic books. It's not a 7-Eleven. It's not a newsstand with a weird guy with Tourette's barking at you and you're trying to read the comics. It's not this newsstand in the supermarket with those giant collections that they used to do. It
Hmm.
was a comic book store, just comic books everywhere. It was called Enterprise 1701. And I remember I bought a stack of books, and this became, and me and my buddy, he was spending the night at my house. We got a stack of books, and we spent half the night reading the books, trading them, talking about them. And that started my collection. And I would say I was a hardcore comic book collector for probably the next 10 years.
Hmm.
Um, Couple thousand comic books. I stopped, I even sustained it through college.
Hmm.
And there's so many distractions in college.
Yeah.
But I held on to it, and I kind of started to it started to dissipate, when I started working right after college, and that was in like the early mid 90s, and everything was crossing. It was like it was the boom. It was the
Yeah.
tail end of the boom, and
Hmm.
everything was a crossover and a variant cover, and you were like, why do I gotta buy 7 issues just
Yeah.
to this know the story? And I just kind of lost touch, and picked it up again, probably about 10 years ago. And now, I'm just grabbing collections of books I love. It's too
Yeah.
hard to keep up with the series, but I've got so much love and nostalgia for that old stuff, especially those comics from like 82 to
Mhm.
around 89.
Okay.
There's a lot of stuff that
Good
that
era.
really resonates, and a lot of
Hmm.
childhood childhood love wrapped
Yeah.
in those pages.
Hmm. Man, sounds like it's funny. Your story is a lot like mine with comics. I didn't go I didn't there was no beach town for me because I'm in Omaha, or I was in Iowa at the time. But by the
Okay.
way, is that a 311 shirt you have?
Yes. Yes.
Rep in Omaha. Very
Yes.
very
Nice. Yeah.
nice.
My family's from Iowa.
Oh,
Yeah.
really? Cool.
Yeah. My folks are from Iowa. They moved to Florida in the early 60s. So
Cool.
I was
Cool.
born and raised in Central Florida, but spent every summer riding mopeds through cornfields.
Oh,
So
so you get
yeah.
you get it. Then you
Yeah,
get
absolutely.
it.
Absolutely.
Mine was a like a Walgreens, or I don't know if it was a Walgreens. That was my first rack that I saw,
Hmm.
and or that I can remember seeing and just being like, what are these things?
Yeah.
It just
The whole world just opens up to you,
right.
you
And
know?
I was just in, and yeah, I went in and out and in and out, and yeah, and I'm a lot like you nowadays too. I don't get a lot of floppies. I still get
Hmm.
some. There's a
Hmm.
few that I'm like, every month I'm buying this. I don't care.
Hmm.
Uh, but I also have the Marvel Unlimited app because it pays for itself in a
Hmm.
month.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Marvel. I can't. I'm sorry, local comic book shops. I really.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a reason it works.
Yeah, right. Okay, well let's get away from that negative stuff
Yeah,
and
exactly. Let's cleanse, get on to the good stuff.
tell me about and I repeat this in every episode just so everybody knows what's going on. You are here to tell me about your absolute favorite single issue, but I
Yeah,
like a little build up.
sure.
So you're gonna talk about your number three and your number two
Yeah,
before we go into number one. So
yeah.
I'm gonna give the floor to you and let you talk about these two comics.
Okay. All right. My number three is Detective Comics number 437. It's from 1937, and it's Detective Comics. The main story is on Batman, but where my heart lies is in the story in the back. It's 8 pages. Archie Goodwin, Walt Simonson, Manhunter.
Oh, oh.
This is like a 9 issue story,
Hmm.
something like that. It ran through like issues 437 through 443 in the Detective Comics in the 70s. This was Goodwin and Simonson relaunching the Manhunter character. This is Paul Kirk. He was like a big game hunter, ends up somewhere in Asia in this super secret society of assassins that train him in the martial arts, and he
I love it.
becomes like this hero that goes out. I don't know if he was a mercenary or a vigilante or whatever, but he's got this funky Asian looking outfit.
Mhm.
He uses a Mauser pistol and throwing stars, and one of those crazy, their knife glove spear things.
Yeah.
You know, that's the technical term. Um, but it's like I remember this book, and it was me and my bro. We were like in seventh grade. We were at Enterprise 1701, the comic book shop, and
Mhm.
going through old issues. And I was a Batman fan, looking for something different. And I don't know why, but this Detective Comics 437 and just appearance of the Manhunter.
Mhm.
I bought. I think I probably bought the entire run that night. You know,
Oh,
all those issues, and read it, and it just blew my mind. I mean, Simonson's art is
Simonson's art.
nobody draws like Walt Simonson, you
Nobody.
know, and and Archie Goodwin. Archie Goodwin was the master. I remember Archie Goodwin also did the Empire Strikes Back comic book
Yep.
adaptation, which I had in a paperback, not a trade
Whoa.
paperback, a paperback.
Whoa.
Yeah. And then you're like, I'm reading a real book. See, it's paperback.
It's a
Um,
book.
yeah, I'm reading. And but yeah, Detective Comics 437, first appearance of Goodwin Simonson Manhunter.
Mhm.
Huge book for me. Um, number two, number two is 1982 GI Joe #1 Marvel Comics.
Classic.
This is the book. This was probably my gateway drug into comic collecting.
Mhm.
And I because in 1982 I had this fascination with military uh, and military and movies and
Mhm.
action and superheroes, and being a child in the 70s growing up with GI Joe.
Yeah.
He was, bigger, and he had the
Mhm.
coffee ground beard. He had fuzzy
Yep.
beard,
Yep. Yep.
and all that. My GI Joe would hook up with my sister's Barbie. We don't talk about it. Um, uh, there's probably some adventure people wandering around that he's responsible for, but I don't know how I connected to the GI Joe comic. It's the first comic that ever got a TV commercial. I
Mhm.
remember that, and for some reason, again, Enterprise 1701, and I think it's because it was the first issue. It was the first comic book that I was there at the beginning. It's
Mm.
like, oh, this is brand new, and I knew of GI Joe, but it was a different kind of GI
Yeah.
Joe. This is also what this was like, kind of the first synergy between comic books and toys, and
Yeah.
Hasbro did all the line of action figures. But I
Yeah.
remember reading this comic, and it's written by Larry Hama.
Larry Hama, GOAT,
Yep,
as the kids say.
yeah, and he did, I think, a good chunk of
Yeah.
those GI Joe books, and then Herb Trimpe,
Mhm.
he was the artist, and it was just something like they're military, but they're also kind of futuristic, and so they're
Mhm.
kind of like superheroes, but they're also soldiers, and something just clicked, and I decided I'm gonna I'm gonna get every issue of this book.
Mhm.
And so that was the book that kicked off my comic book collection, my comic book collecting.
Yeah.
Um, and I remember in the second issue, and they're in the Arctic. The
Mhm.
second issue is they're in the Arctic, and I bought the issue, and then on the back cover you could fill out a form and you could join the GI Joe
Oh,
supporters or GI Joe
nice.
recruits or whatever. So I cut that out. Right, I was
Oof.
like 13 years old. I didn't know.
I know, I
I
know,
didn't know. The follies of youth and the
Mhm.
fancy get free junk in the mail. So I cut it out, and I mailed it off. And I still have those comics, and it's probably that GI Joe #2 is probably the most successful comic, the most what is it? The most valuable comic I own, because they didn't run. It was before the series exploded. They
Mhm.
didn't do a big run. There's very few of them out there. And what did I do? I cut up the back cover of it, so I can get a bowl of soup for that comic book. But that
Hey.
GI Joe series was a big deal to me, and that issue. I think I read that issue one
Mhm.
over and over. I tried to draw the characters. It was a big deal. Those are my number three was that Detective Comics first appearance of the new Manhunter,
Hmm.
and then GI Joe #1 launching A Real American Hero.
Okay, so to top those two, you went pretty big. Those those are some good ones. I like especially that GI Joe #1. That one when I saw it on the form, I was like, yes. Um, so those two are great, but you have to give us your #1. So if you please.
My all-time #1 comic, and I feel vindicated now. But it is Wolverine #1, 1982, Marvel Comics, Chris Claremont writer,
Mhm.
the amazing, iconic, legendary Frank Miller
Miller, yeah.
on illustration. It's got that unforgettable cover,
Oh, the
Wolverine, yeah,
oh,
with the claws, with the
yeah.
claws.
Oh,
Um, and Funny side story, when I was dating my wife, we went out to the Outback one night, and
excellent.
I'd had my bloomin' onion and way
Mhm.
too many beers, and I took all the steak knives on the table and I put them in between my fingers, and I mimicked that cover. I went Wolverine, and the woman still stayed with me. I should have married her then, but don't give a nerd beer man and
Yeah,
access to steak knives. He'll do his
they're
Wolverine
they're
impression.
gonna do Wolverine. He's gonna
You're
have
gonna
it.
schnickety schnickety schnick schnick. But that comic was transcendent.
Mhm.
I'd never seen Wolverine before,
Oh
and
wow.
I was my superheroes were Spider-Man, Superman. I mean,
Mhm.
the most dangerous I got was the Hulk, and
Right?
here is a character who doesn't is not a nice guy, right?
Oh
Is
no.
he a hero? Is he the bad guy? He plays by his own rules.
Mhm.
He's like, and it's like, and it's not a superhero story,
Not at
you know.
all. Yeah.
No, it's a those first issues is a limited series. It was his
Mhm.
first solo book,
Mhm.
so it's Claremont and Miller. He's it takes Wolverine to Japan. You learn
Mhm.
about all his background there. I think this series was it kind of fit into the James Mangold, Hugh Jackman Wolverine movie
Mhm.
that came out, 20 years ago
Yeah,
or
yeah,
whatever.
yeah. Oh
Uh,
yeah. Yeah, it does. Yeah.
and But it's just like the book is cinematic. It's Frank Miller.
It's yeah.
I mean, it's like, say what you want, the man's the king. He owned it. I
It,
mean, Wolverine, Daredevil,
it's
Batman, Dark
beautiful.
Knight. Come
It's all
on.
beautiful. Like
Yeah.
it's that and you said it was cinematic
Yeah.
and I recently reread it and I had completely forgotten like the very first thing you see him doing is fighting a bear.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's, and I know now in 2025 like Wolverine fighting a bear is whatever, but wow.
It was pretty awesome. He was fighting a bear, and it was a bear that had gone nuts because he had been shot by a hunter, and
Yeah.
so he'd gone crazy. And
Mhm.
then Wolverine tracked the hunter back to the bar and beat the crap out of him for messing with the
The
bear.
bear.
And
Yeah.
it's just such a great and again, not knowing anything about Wolverine,
Mhm.
it was such a great introduction to that character.
Oh.
And it's like, it's like, I like Hugh Jackman in the movies, like Deadpool and Wolverine was a blast.
Mhm.
I think Jackman does a great job as that character. And it's awesome, being a growing up loving comic books,
Yeah.
and being secret about it, because in the 80s, being a teenager in the
Oh
early to
yeah.
mid 80s, you didn't tell people you like comic books,
Mm-mm. Nope.
unless you like swirlies. I mean, it was
Hmm.
such a
Hmm.
different vibe back then. And I can remember sitting around with my friends, and we'd fantasize about, man, why don't make superhero movies? I mean, the comic books are like storyboards. All they got to do
Hmm.
is take that and put it on the screen. And then when they made comic book movies, they sucked because they put them all in like black leather, and
Yeah.
oh, it can no one wants to see a real comic book in a movie. and so
Oh.
it took forever to get a decent comic book. I mean, we had like Chris Reeves Superman, Richard Donner 78, which was awesome. But
Mhm.
then it took us another 10 years to get a decent comic book movie with Tim Burton, Michael Keaton, and Batman in
Yep.
'89. And then it was what, another 10, 15 years before we started the Fox, the 20th Century Fox X-Men
Yep.
movies. Um, and then and the Sam Raimi Spider-Man. But
Hmm.
then it was like, and then it was almost another 10 years before MCU. So
Hmm.
it's, and now what, we get three superhero movies a year. These kids have no idea how the good they got it. They
Right?
just, and they're just taking it for granted. And so what I'm
Uh-huh.
saying is, Hugh Grant is Wolverine. That's who the pop culture consciousness thinks about.
Mhm.
But if you're a fan of the movie Wolverine, you just don't know until you dive into a comic book character.
Yeah.
And yeah, this it was, it's like certain pieces of art come along and they change your life.
Hmm.
They just become a part of who you are. They change how you look at things.
Hmm.
Being, I was always that kid writing stories and drawing pictures.
Hmm.
My dad was like, "Go outside, play baseball," and I'm like, "Oh no, I'm gonna draw this picture. I'm gonna read this comic book." I was always an indoors kid,
Uh-huh.
um, and this stuff, it was it was home. It was fun. It was exciting. It's like I was a naive suburban kid.
Mhm.
No real trauma or anything, but it was still a great escape.
Oh.
um and I think there's something inspiring about that. And now it's like with geek chic and everything, it's cool to be a nerd. And it's like,
Mhm.
thank you, Kevin Smith and Big Bang Theory, for making that all cool and acceptable. We're all out and proud now. That's great. Um, but it's like I do. There was a lot. We were like a secret society.
Hmm.
It was like we were like Fight Club. You
Yeah.
could walk through the halls and you knew who the comic book
Yeah.
guys were, but we didn't talk about it.
Yeah.
And we didn't talk about it at school. We
Yeah. Yep.
maybe talked about it at home, or we met up at the comic book shop and
Hmm.
then we dropped some knowledge. But
Yep. This.
and then at school, it's like you didn't even dare doodle that stuff on your Trapper Keeper. You did not want to draw attention to yourself. But yeah, that Wolverine #1, man, that's the book.
Is so one of my favorite things about that issue too is it ends with he loses like bad.
Hmm.
He gets his ass kicked
Yeah.
and he's like in the alley and he's like, what happened? And it's like, dude beat you up, Wolverine, right? And I think that's part of why it's such a good story, right?
Hmm.
You see him
Yeah.
fight a bear, you see him
Yeah.
go to a bar, and then you see him like facing somebody that he actually has to like think about and like fight, and he just get is destroyed. But then because he's Wolverine, because he's Logan, he's like,
Yeah.
all right, well, I better figure this out, and he eventually goes back and whatnot. But
Yeah.
such a good story, just
Yeah. And there's very few people who can pull off the phrase "bub" and make it work.
right. And
And
he does it.
and he does it. I can't pull that off.
No, I mean, I don't think
Yeah.
I've ever met
Yeah.
anyone who can do it.
Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you for sharing that again.
Yeah.
I'm biased. I'm a little bit younger than you, so like Wolverine was like everywhere when I was
Right.
in comics.
Yeah.
Like, and
Yeah.
I still am. I mean, he still is, but
Yeah.
um, yeah, so it's cool getting your perspective of like not having him and then being because he was always Wolverine to me. I'm a
Yeah.
few years behind you. Not many, I don't think. Um
Yeah. Yeah. I'm prematurely gray. It's misleading. Yeah.
well,
but but but
thanks.
it is interesting. I mean, yeah, it was a different time,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
pop culture was different then,
Oh
and it's
yeah.
and it's very interesting to see it now, right?
Yeah.
And I my son is a teenager. He is roughly the same age I was when I was really starting to get into comics.
Mhm.
He's not into any of that stuff, but it's like that's karma, because it was like my dad my dad wanted me to go to ball games, and
Hmm.
I wanted to just read comics. I want my kid to just read comics, and he studies amoebas and bacterias and stuff. So I mean, it's just that's how the generations, man. You know, they they throw you some curveballs, but it was like the access that everybody has now,
Hmm.
you know, like you were saying with the app, right?
Yeah.
You know, you just pick it up on your phone, and it's like
Hmm.
we had to go when I was a kid. We had to go out and find it.
I know. Yeah,
You know,
me too.
we had to hunt it down,
Uh-huh.
and hoard it.
Yeah.
And
Oh, phew.
and maybe that's why it feels so special to me. You
Right.
know, because
You
it had to be earned. It had to be won.
You had
Uh,
to find a special place that
yeah,
nobody else knew about, and
yeah,
it was fun doing that. And now
yeah,
the comic shop I go to, and I love it. It's great. I love the people that work there. I'm friends with the owners, but it's like it's so fancy, and there's like a coffee shop in it, and
yeah,
it's
yeah,
great, and I love it. I'll buy a
yeah,
coffee every time I
yeah,
get a comic, but. Yeah, there's something about I don't know. Dirty's not the right word.
yeah, yeah,
Like a little
yeah.
grimier. Like,
Dingy
yeah,
and cluttered. There's
yeah,
stacks of boxes everywhere,
yeah. You
and
could just go.
there's some crazy some crazy huge old guy behind the counter who's giving you the stink eye because
Yeah,
you lingered too long in
yeah,
front of the
right.
comic. It's like
And
when my dad was a traveling salesman, and during the summers he would take me with him
mhm,
on his routes, and so we'd be gone a week, 2 weeks, and he'd hit 3 or 4 states. And what would happen is we'd get to a new town, and we'd stop, and we'd find a phone book, and my dad would find the listing for comic book shops. He'd tear it out of the phone book. We'd get back in the car. We'd find the comic book shop closest to where his stops were, and
mhm.
he would drop me off at the comic book store, and then he would go make his sales calls. And so I would go, and I haunted some comic book shops throughout the entire Southeast.
That's
Um,
amazing.
and you know, I'm familiar with that stink eye. You know, and when they're like that kid's been here too long.
I,
Yeah, you know,
I might have
he's
to
been
have
looking. Is he gonna buy anything? You know, this kid's been here too long.
I might have to have you come back on and talk about all these trips
Okay.
to various comic
Oh,
shops.
all right.
That's
Sure,
awesome.
absolutely.
Oh,
Yeah, as you can tell, I love to wax nerditic, or you know, so you know, and thank you so much for
hey,
having me on to share this.
thanks for coming on. This is like I was telling you, I think before we started recording, like people seemed really excited, and I hope this goes through well, and I get lots of people that want to talk about their favorite comics because it's so much fun to just sit down. And I've been doing this now. I'm looking at my schedule here. I've been doing this now a couple nights a week for the last couple of weeks. So I'm building up my stock here, and I'm gonna put it together and release it to the world. And you're gonna be part of it. And I can't thank you enough
Well,
for doing
thank
that.
you. Thank you
Yeah.
so much. And I look forward to sharing it on all my Nerdspresso pages. And you know, I hope you follow me. I
Oh
with
yeah.
my buddy in Raleigh, Durham runs a local news website, and
Mhm.
so I do the pop culture column for him
That's
every
awesome.
Friday. So every Friday I roll out a new Nerdspresso on Threads and Facebook, and drop all this nerd on the populace.
Oh,
So
I love it. I love it. Well, and I'll make sure to put like links to everything when I post this. And yeah, thanks a lot for coming in.
no, thanks for having me. This was a real blast, and I
Yeah.
appreciate you reaching out and inviting me.
Oh, I appreciate you coming. Thanks a lot.
Okay.